أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
So alhamdulillah, just for those brothers who weren't here 2 weeks ago, we covered the acts which break the wudu, the acts which nullify the wudu. We covered 8 altogether. Some of them are known to everybody, discharging anything from the private parts, right? The flowing of blood. We discussed what does it mean when they say the blood has to flow in order for it to break, right? If the wound is a certain size, I give the example. For example, if the size of the wound is this big, then what would you consider flowing blood? So if the blood ends up gathering and remains stagnant within the size of the wound, then that won't be considered flowing blood. Once it exceeds the wound, then that's what you would consider flowing blood, right? And like this, we covered, vomiting. If a person falls asleep, right, just to refresh our memory, jog our memory, this is also an important point. When a person falls into deep sleep, now when does his wudu break? When he's laying down and he's in deep sleep. What is the reasoning behind this? It's because when a person is asleep, he's basically in that state, he's unconscious, but he doesn't have control over his body, and his joints become loose. So once his joints become loose, it's possible that he might break his wudu, for example, and he doesn't even know it. So the scholars mentioned that if the person's backside is firmly seated on the floor, for example, like the way we are sitting right now, if it's firmly seated on the floor and a person falls asleep in that position, then that will not break the wudu. Similarly, we might have heard that leaning against something and falling asleep breaks your wudu. In reality, as long as the backside of the person is firmly seated on the floor and a person is leaning on the wall, then his wudu will not break. The main thing is that the backside has to be firmly seated on the floor. If, for example, a person is leaning on the wall and he picks his leg up, right? So for example, if a person lifts up his legs and his shins are erect, for example, and he leans on the wall and falls asleep, in that position, if he falls asleep, then the wudu will break. Alright, so today we'll be covering the faraid al-ghusl.
But what if he's sitting and he's snoring and you can see he's sleeping deep?
No, in that situation his wudu will not break, because the main thing is that the backside has to be firmly seated on the floor. Because through that, then there's no possibility of him discharging anything, for example, passing gas or anything in that situation. If a person is laying down, that's not the case, right? In that case, his wudu will break. So today we'll be covering a number of things: the faraid al-ghusl, the sunan al-ghusl, and what makes ghusl fard, what makes ghusl necessary. These are a few points, you can quickly go through it. There are 3 main faraid al-ghusl, acts which are fard and ghusl. So for example, if a person, ghusl becomes fard on him, then it will be necessary for him to fulfill these 3 actions, right? Similarly, if a person, say, if ghusl is sunnat, in order for him to attain that reward of a sunnat ghusl, these 3 things have to be fulfilled. The first is gargling water 3 times. Just how, for example, in wudu we gargle water, but in wudu it's sunnat, right? In ghusl it is fard for you to gargle water 3 times, or you put water in your mouth, you tilt your head back a little bit and you gargle the water. 3 times you have to do this, right? If you're fasting, for example in the case of Ramadan, then it's not necessary for you. It's not fard for you to gargle the water, right? Just put the water in your mouth, move it around in your mouth and spit it back out, right? That will suffice. Number 2 is putting water into the nose 3 times. And we mentioned when we were talking about the sunan of wudu, until which part do you have to make sure the water reaches until? The fuqaha, they mentioned the soft part of the nose, right? You'll see there's a part of the nose where the bone starts, and right underneath that there's a soft part, right? So until that part you have to make sure that you sniff the water up until there. So when you do that 3 times, that's fard in ghusl, right? But in wudu, you consider that to be a sunnah. And number 3 is pouring water, or making sure that water reaches every part of the body at least once.
Maulana, if you're not comfortable with sniffing the water up until the soft tissue of the nose, can you wet the fingers, for example, make sure you wet the entire inside of the nose?
I'm not sure about that. I'll find out and I'll let you know. I'm not sure about that. So the third one was pouring body over the water at least once, right? 1 time is fard. So This is pretty straightforward. These are the three fara'id of ghusl. So now after this we'll move on to pros, add which are sunnat in ghusl. Right? So just again, yes.
What do you, can you elaborate a little bit on what do you mean by pouring over the body?
Yeah, we'll cover that in the sunnat when I mention the sunnat points. Then I'll cover what is it meant by this, which parts are sunnat, which parts do you start from, right? This is the fard. The fard is just making sure every part of the body, making sure water reaches every single part of the body. So now the sunnat of ghusl. Yes. First one is washing your hands until the wrists 3 times. Right? This is sunnat when a person is performing ghusl. Number 2. Second act which is sunnat in ghusl is washing the private parts as well as those parts which have impurity on it. So for example, if you have a blood stain on your body, then you will wash that off. Number 3 is to perform wudu. Right, while you're performing ghusl, one sunnat act is to perform wudu. And again, the books of fiqh, the old books, the classical scholars, they mention that when you're performing wudu while you're doing your ghusl, then what you do is that you don't wash the feet, right? You wait until you finish performing your ghusl and then you wash your feet. This is because at that time, the places where they would perform ghusl, it wasn't the way we have it nowadays where there's a drain. The water would gather up by their feet. And we mentioned about ma'ul mustamal, water that's used to wash the body. What did we mention? What was the ruling of that water? You can't use it to purify your body, right? The water itself is pure, but you can't use it to attain purity. So at that time, the water would gather up by their feet, right? So they would wait until after they would finish the ghusl, and then they would wash their feet. Since nowadays we have the drain and the water just constantly flowing, right? The water, the ma'ul mustamal, the used water, it goes down the drain. Then we perform wudu in the regular order that we do, right? Washing the face, right? Washing the arms until the elbows. And you do masa as well, right? Some people, some fuqaha, they write that, you don't do masa because what's the point? You already have water on your head. No, the preferred opinion is that you do masa as well when you're performing ghusl. And also you wash your feet as well. Yes, and the fourth one, as we mentioned, the fard was to pour water over the entire body at least once. The sunnat is to pour water over the body, the entire body 3 times. And again, like I mentioned when we were covering wudu, at that time they had vessels and containers through which they would perform wudu. So similarly, when they would perform ghusl, right, they also have containers and vessels. The sunnah method of this, the fuqaha mentioned, is that from the right shoulder, they say you pour water 3 times over the right shoulder, and then you pour water 3 times over the left shoulder, and then you pour water 3 times over your head. So in the shower, since we have the shower head, we don't have the container, so what we can do is that once we get in the shower, right, this is the first thing that we can do is, we move our body a little bit so that the water starts hitting the right side, our right shoulder, right, and then afterwards, the left shoulder, and then afterwards from the head, and like that we wash, make sure that water reaches every single portion of the body, right? So these are again the 4 sunnah of ghusl: washing the hand until the wrist 3 times. Then afterwards you wash the private parts as well as those parts of the body that have any type of impurity on them. Number 3 is to perform wudu, and number 4 is to pour water over the entire body 3 times. After this, there are some etiquettes of ghusl.
So that's like naful, right?
Yeah, these are, you can say mustahab, right?
Mustahab naful.
Is it okay if you can make intention also?
As part of the adab, mustahabat, that's the first thing we're going to mention. Right, one of the mustahab acts is to make niyat, right? Some scholars include as part of the sunnah, right? Some say that this is actually etiquette of wudu.
Do Shafi say it's fard?
What?
Like to make intention?
For wudu they say it's fard. For ghusl, I'm not sure. I'll find out for you. Ghusl should be made in a private place. Right now we're in the bathroom, we're already secluded over there. The second is that ghusl should be made in a private place. Number 3, the etiquette is to not face the qibla while performing your ghusl. Number 4, again, just like in wudu, to make sure that we don't waste water, use more water than we're supposed to. And number 5, also similar to wudu, is not to speak when performing ghusl. Right? It's against the etiquette. Right? So the etiquette, again, first is niyat, you make intention. Number 2 is ghusl should be made in a private place. Number 3, when performing ghusl, you shouldn't face the qibla. Number 4, not wasting any water, more water than we're supposed to. And number 5, not to speak during ghusl. Right? Some people probably have a habit of singing in the shower. And again, which acts make ghusl necessary? So for us, there's one, right? There are 4 altogether. 1 is related to us, 1 is related to the deceased, right? It's followed to wash a dead person. It's followed on the people who are living. And 2 are related to women, right? After the menstrual cycle, and after when they give birth to a child, they have what is called postnatal discharge, right? The maximum amount of that is 40 days, right? And there's no minimum amount, right? After the child is born, it could not happen at all, right? It could be maybe for a few seconds, but the maximum amount is 40 days. For menstruation, the least amount is 3 days, and the maximum is 10 days, right? So 2 of them are in regards to women. 1 of them is related to us, right? Which is straightforward. So the act which makes ghusl fard on us is discharge of semen. Now this has to be elaborated because in the fuqaha they have also mentioned that it's not only discharge of semen, but in a case, for example, if a person has relations with his wife and discharge does not happen, right? If penetration occurs but discharge does not happen, in that scenario, ghusl also becomes fard, the wajib on the person. He has to perform the ghusl, right? There's discharge of semen. Anyway, through a wet dream, whether through masturbating a person that happens, then still it will be fard, right? Anyway, the main thing, and another thing to clarify is, what if it doesn't exit, right, from the private part? Some people, they probably hold, in some cases, for example, the person holds it until basically the force of the semen coming out stops, and then afterwards he lets it go, right? Some scenarios, right, they hold the private part, and the semen, they wait for the semen to stop, and then afterwards they let it go, and the semen, what if it doesn't come out in that scenario? Is the ghusl still wajib in that scenario? Huh?
Some medicines do.
Some medicine, okay. The main, yeah, so ghusl will still be wajib in that scenario. Because the fuqaha, they say the main thing is when it leaves from its initial spot, which is what, the loins, between the loins, right? Which is located like in the back with the pelvis area, right? So if it discharges from that area, but it doesn't come out, right, of the private part, then in that scenario ghusl will be wajib, because the main thing you consider is it discharging from the main area, right?
Can you explain? There's, I think, 2 words that we use in Arabic. I think one is it mani?
Mani, yes. Mani is semen.
Okay, and then there's the other one.
Madi is pre-seminal fluid.
Is pre-seminal fluid,
yes,
right?
Pre-ejaculatory fluid, and then there's muddy. I don't know the medical term for muddy, but muddy, they say usually sometimes after a person urinates, when it leaves from his body, right? And it's usually sticky, right? It's not like semen and it's not like the pre-seminal fluid, but it's something which is sticky and it comes after a person urinates. And the fiqh will also mention that sometimes it might happen if a person lifts something heavy, then it'll come out.
So madhi is not...
Madhi, if that comes out, then a person will have to make wudu, the pre-seminal fluid. A person will have to perform wudu. And semen, in that scenario, a person will have to perform ghusl.
Money.
Yes,
and
semen.
and the third one was, you said,
Yeah, also
the pre-seminal fluid.
No, that was the second one.
So the pre-seminal fluid does not require ghusl?
No, just wudu.
Okay. So that's only in case of like arousal or whatever the case is. Okay.
Yes, in those scenarios.
And you said that it's not if it just comes out, if it's just comes out from its source.
Yes.
So like
that's the main thing. If it comes out and the person
gets that feeling.
Yeah, gets the feeling.
Okay.
Then that scenario also will become wajib.
Okay.
Another thing which is important, which is related to nocturnal emission, right? When a person has a wet dream. So a person might wake up, he'll feel that there's some moistness around that area, but he doesn't remember that he had a wet dream. And there's a scenario where, for example, he'll remember that he had a wet dream. So in the case of when he remembers that he had a wet dream, and when he wakes up, he finds that there's moistness in that area, then it doesn't, if he is convinced that it's semen, or if he's convinced that it's the pre-seminal fluid, or if he has doubt, he doesn't know, is it semen, is it the pre-seminal fluid, and in all those scenarios, ghusl will be wajib, unless he knows for sure that it's wadi. I mentioned wadi is what? That which... No, it's not pre-seminal fluid. I'm not sure about the medical term, but the specifically mentioned it's something which is very sticky, and usually comes out after a person urinates, or when a person lifts something heavy. I'll find out the term for it. I'm not really sure. What was it called?
I think he's correct.
Don't get wet dreams or have intercourse.
Yeah, that's because I think that's because of direct pressure on the prostate gland.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if a person has full conviction that it is, what was it called again?
Prostatic fluid.
Prostatic fluid, yes. If he knows for sure that it was prostatic fluid, in that scenario, ghusl will not be wajib.
What's the Arabic term?
Wadi.
Do you mind writing those three down for us?
Yes. Number one in Arabic is money. Transliteration is right, and then you have madi, and then you have wadi.
And even if it's not if it's pre-seminal, ghusl is still wajib.
Yes.
Okay.
If he remembers that he had a wet dream.
Okay, so that's only in the case of during sleep. So, but if you are awake and that was to occur, then only wudu is necessary.
Yes, wudu is necessary. And then again, so I mentioned one scenario was what there's moistness that he perceives, and he knows for sure he had a wet dream. And in that scenario, ghusl will be wajib unless he knows that it was wadi, right? And then there's the other scenario where he feels moistness in that area, but he doesn't remember that he had a wet dream. And that scenario, only when he knows for sure that it's semen, then ghusl will be wajib. So again, let me write it down. For a person, one scenario is he remembers he had a wet dream, So the first scenario is he remembers that he had a wet dream and he feels the moistness in his private area. In this scenario, the only time when the ghusl will not be wajib is when he has full conviction that the moistness is wadi, right? It's not, he knows it's not semen, he knows it's not pre-seminal fluid. He knows for sure that it's wadi in this scenario.
Here it's
right?
just saying that wadi is pre or post urinal emission. It's not mentioned.
Yeah, the books of fiqh, they mention when does it come out. They say it comes out post urinal emission. That's
but it's different than urine, because urine obviously is not sticky.
It's different than urine. Yes.
And so even for pre-seminal fluid, you have to do ghusl?
Yes. if, again, he perceives the moistness and he remembers that he had a wet dream, in all the scenarios, besides the case if he knows for sure that it was wadi, he has to perform ghusl. And then again, if he doesn't remember, the second is if he doesn't remember he had a wet dream and he feels moisture or moistness in his private area, then the ghusl will not be wajib. The only time ghusl will be wajib is when he knows for sure that it's semen, that the moisture is from the semen.
And Maulana Sahib, if we, let's say, are in a situation where we're in school or we're in work, and let's say because of arousal or whatever case may be, some pre-seminal fluid is released, especially onto the clothing. So what is supposed to occur in that situation? If only wudu is necessary to purify yourself, how does that affect the clothing in terms of its state of being able to pray in that scenario?
Is it the same like blood?
That's the thing. Pre-seminal fluid, if it's blood, I'm not sure if it's the same as blood or if it has a different ruling. If it's the same as blood, then again, remember we mentioned, if it's the size of a dirham, which is a 50-cent coin.
How big is that?
The 50-cent coin, a dirham you could say is probably like this much, the inside of your palm, like about this area.
$50.
Like the 50-cent coin, if you see it. If the amount of impurity is that big, then you can't pray with that clothing. And you have to make sure that you wash that impurity off, right? But that's the thing. I'm not sure if madhi falls into that category. I'll let you know though.
Okay.
Sir, Maulana, can you just repeat the one more time? If he does not remember he had a wet dream, ghusl is not needed if he's sure that it's not.
Unless the ghusl is not needed, unless he's sure that it's semen.
Okay.
In that scenario, then that's when the ghusl will be wajib. So that will be all for today. We covered the fard al-ghusl, the sunnah, the adab, etiquette of ghusl, and what necessitates ghusl. Any brothers have any other questions? Yes.
When there's one peas in their sleep, some people do.
No, in that scenario, no. So there will be
Just
all,
wudu?
just
Wudu
wudu.
change.
Yeah, ghusl won't be necessary. Yes.
Are you allowed to do ghusl sitting or standing?
You could do it both. Some say that one of the etiquettes is to do it while sitting. Do ghusl while sitting. The both are allowed. Yes.
So, what if, for example, you go to like a clean lake and you just dip your whole body in it? Would you have like ghusl from that? Or do you have to
If all those body parts are washed, water, if you know that all water reached all parts of the body, and again, one was making sure water reaches every part of the body. One was gargling the water 3 times, and one was sniffing the water 3 times. So if you, for example, submerge yourself into the water of a lake, and then after that you gargle water 3 times, and then in that case the ghusl will be done. The salat will be fulfilled.
And if he doesn't remember it's not a wet dream, he only needs to do ghusl if he's sure it's semen. What about pre-semen?
No.
No, just semen for that.
Any other questions? Okay, Jazakallah khairan for your time, brothers. Inshallah, next week we will cover tayammum. And then, if we have time, maybe we can do masa. If not, then we'll do masa the following week, masa on leather socks. And then after that, we'll start with the salat. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, brothers, for your time. SubhanAllah wa bihamdihi, subhanahu wa ta'ala wa bihamdihi. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka.